Okay, so I'm not sure why I can't see other people. Anyway, that'll be interesting. If you are here, just type something, which would be really useful. Okay, well, this is a bit weird. It's not like the one I practiced trying, where I could see people. So maybe if you can see and hear me, you could send me a text message so that I know what I'm doing is actually reaching someone, because this is a bit strange. Yay! I see you.
Your face. This is very exciting.
It's very strange. So something I learned is once you start broadcasting, even if nobody's on, if you stop broadcasting, that's it.
Oh, I haven't done one of these before. I've only done I've only done Google Hangouts really with kind of very narrow
topics, yeah,
and all that sort of stuff. So no, I didn't know about all of these other bits.
No, and the Google Hangout is different to the Google Hangout on air. So the Hangout on air is like once you start, you have to keep going. If you stop, that's the end. Whereas with the Google Hangout, you can stop and start. So there we go. There we go. So I've had a few people messaging me going, their Google account's broken and they can't get in. So that seems to be
were you hoping to get numbers? You know, do you want to wait and do it again another time? What do you want to do?
Well, I think I might as well get it up and get it read. Share with you some of the stuff out of the book, and then because then it gives me the chance to publish it and see how how the YouTube part of it works, and I can always reconvene to. Oh, look, somebody else may have come on. There we go. Maybe
vanish in a sudden. Just a second.
Yeah. You
So did someone else appear?
There's someone who's just logging in, it's telling me, which is awesome.
They do all kinds of double checks of now, you know you're going to be recorded, and you know that you're no longer, the convener can turn off your camera not at any time or this. So they're just being, they're probably just waiting for all that to happen, really.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So there was a little bit of a process in getting in, was there? Because I've not been on the receiving end. I've only been on the...
It says things like you need to know that people that you don't know will be able to see you, and that the convener can turn your camera on and off without sort of letting you know that they're doing that, and that the recording is that you're not allowed to use any illegal, like anything you don't own in the recording, and all the usual.
All of that sort of stuff. Okay, very good, very good. And is Lachlan around, or is he busy being
the because we had just come back in bolted in from lunch, and I said, like I said, because we've got a few other things going on that are not appropriate for this forum, but he just bolted off to do what you do after lunch, and he'll be back momentarily. And the plan is to watch and listen. That's our
awesome. Awesome. Well, let's see if this other person gets in here. Haven't sent me a message to say that there is a problem. Let me just see if I can.
This is the tricky technical part. No one told us when we started being speakers and authors that we'd also have to be, you know.
I know, have to be like techie people as well. So I'll edit all this out because I've actually.
I was hoping you were going to say that. Apart from anything else, the fact that it's going to be a very intimate fireside chat, you might want to just take the voice, for example, and decide not to show that there was only, you know, these two people on the couch in Hyatt.
Yes, exactly.
Really, it's always
quite bizarre. Yeah. Quite bizarre. All right, well, I'm not sure why. Let me just see. I'll just see if I can get hold of Tony, who looks like trying to get in and see.
You saw people trying to get in, so I was just wondering whether they're sort of trying to get in on the original link or something.
Yeah, that's right.
See that anymore. And you shouldn't be able to see them doing that anymore because you're not in that link anymore.
Yeah, well, that's right. So they should be trying, and that's going across to message, so that should reach him. So hopefully that will work. Who knows?
We bookshops already, the new version, and both.
So it'll go live on Amazon on the 18th, and then it'll go out to about 50, 60 bookstores worldwide. But every bookstore can order it through Ingram's distributors. So what I was saying to people is if they just go in and ask for it, so then your bookstore is likely to stock it if they get someone saying, I'd like to order it in.
They might as well order 2 or 3, not just one.
Yeah, yes, that's exactly right. As they should.
You know, volume 1 and volume 2. So.
Yes, and there's the new release of The Infidel coming out, so they'll both be by True North, and so they've got the stunningly beautiful covers.
Covers. I mean, I like the other cover was fine and very much in the genre, but the new covers are just so beautiful.
Yeah, they are. They're something to treasure. So, which I'm really pleased about. It's been fantastic working with both Motivational Press and True North. There are 2 different imprints of the same publisher, and I've got to say that they treat their authors very well. Lots of support, lots of stepping through the process.
So it's nice to hear that. That's really good to hear.
Yeah, I've been hearing some horror stories from some of the more established publishers of what they're expecting their authors to do and charging fees and all sorts of things, which are just, you know, really really breaking.
Your most recent non-fiction piece, the Energy Code, did you go through the same kind of publishing process, or did you self-publish that one, or what did you do in that?
No, that was actually requested by the publishers. So I was approached by one of their scouts, and she asked me over the Energy Bucket, and she asked me to send through a proposal for the follow-up book. And so basically all of the books that are published by Motivational Press and True North of mine are just full publishing, so they haven't cost me a cent. So they and the True North deal's a 3-book deal. So
there's always going to be a third one of this series.
Yeah, there'll be more than 3, but obviously, you know, they can't commit themselves to. Committing to 3 is pretty good.
So 3 of 3 sounds good.
Yeah, and if they obviously if they do well, then I'll most likely get a contract for some more. So I've started working on book number 3, and that's a whole heap of research, which is pretty fascinating. It's pretty good.
And the first one, the Energy Code, was a self-published or was a publisher?
No, that's publisher. So it's the same publishing house, just their non-fiction imprint, and that's fully published by the publisher. So yeah, no financial contribution by me at all. So I've been very fortunate. The Energy Bucket was a self-published book back in 2010, and as a result of that, I got the deal for the Energy Code.
Okay, so you self-published the Energy Bucket and then went from there.
Yeah. So I did that as part of Showcase.
Yes. And so I'm about to write my next book around Optimism Zone, and I'm the last time I did a whole book by myself, I self-published, but that's now probably 10, 12, maybe 13 even years ago. I think it was 2002 or something, and in those days you kind of had to buy 5,000 and it cost me, or 1,000 and it cost me 5,000 or something. It wasn't a cheap process, but also it was before the really flexible pay as you go print on demand type things. And I'm about to write my next book, which so I want to re-release that one because it's tired and it really needs a new look, and I've run out of copies, which is great. Don't have any that be sold ever, but so I'm just sort of going through the process of thinking, okay, do I write a proposal to a publisher and therefore get into that space, or do I write it and go down the self-publish the first one and kind of
Well, Elise Sullivan's, I introduced her book to my publishers, and so she's doing a hybrid deal with them, and that might be worth you pursuing. Or otherwise, I mean, print on demand is a lot better these days than it was. I don't think it costs anywhere near as much. But Wiley might be someone you want to pass by, because I know they're picking up a few books.
Including, I think the Thought Letters ones do. Scott and Matt's ones are Wiley, aren't they? Wiley.
No, I think he's a Penguin, but or they may have changed. But I know that Peter Cook's he's through Wiley, and I think Jason Fox is through Wiley.
Starting to get interested in author, thought leader type authors. So that's good.
Yeah.
I'm about to start on Optimism Zone and working on getting media, and there's a couple of events happening in the next little while that are in the calendar, like the International Day of Happiness is
fantastic.
Far away, so I'm going to think about in March, and so it's kind of, this year is going to be my Optimism Zone year.
I think that's fantastic, and look, your message is so pertinent to what's going on in the world today. I think. Yeah. So I'm really glad you're writing another book.
Yeah,
really
me too. Now, let me just check whether Lachlan is going to play, because it would be nice to have him here. The only challenge is that it's quite warm here, so you might find him dozing off, not through being bored, but just through sheer fatigue and overwhelm. Are you going to come in and listen or not? Just let me check, please. I'll be back in 1 second. Hello. So he is coming in, and but he's on his way, just washing his hands. And my he made the suggestion, as I did, that maybe you actually might want to turn off our camera, just knowing that we're here listening, and then when you're recording, you're not showing, only two people, and you're not showing one of them falling asleep, which may or may not happen. I'm not saying it will, I'm just saying it might.
Okay, let me just have a look at cameraman. As guest join, hide their audio and video from my broadcast. Yes.
So we are now invisible to you. Because we're still here.
Okay, so that's cool. So what I've done is I'm hiding your audio and video from my broadcast, and when he comes and sits down, I will hide. What will I do? That's the cameraman app that I'm looking at there. And then what's that one? Mute microphone. No, I don't want to do that because I want to. Okay, so. Let's have a little look at that. Oh, look, there you go. You're hidden from the broadcast. And then when he appears, I'll mute. How does that sound?
And can you see the message from me, the message from me somewhere on the screen under group chat?
If I switch on, if I go to group chat, yes, there it is. You can send me a message. Okay, so you do that, and I'll just hide your. I'll mute you. How does that sound? That's going to feel very weird being on my own. Oh, well, I can see
you. He won't. There he is.
Hello.
If you want to not mute us, we can still be here making some kind of.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Hello. How are you? Thank you for getting through the Google. I don't know what that's called. It's almost like a gauntlet.
It is the
Google gauntlet. That's a good title.
Yeah.
That could be a title for a book. The Google gauntlet.
Getting through the Google gauntlet.
The Google gauntlet.
Definitely. All right. So let me now. Have you watched the sneak peek for Veritas at any point, which has that?
We probably should have. Should we have? Sorry.
Oh, it's just. That's okay. This will still make sense. I mean, if you know how the infidel ends, or are you just gonna wing it?
No,
we're gonna wing it. We're winging.
Okay. Well, very, very appreciated. Too delightful. All right, here we go.
We're just supporting you, Liz.
You've got to get out and buy the book sometime.
Oh, you're so kind. You're so sweet.
I actually thought I had ordered them online or something, and that just never happened, and maybe my order never came to fruition. So I've been kind of in this waiting space of, oh, I'm sure they'll turn up soon. It'll turn up soon, and then it hasn't. So
maybe you can go to your local bookstore and harass them instead.
Which is a much better thing for you that I do that, and then that'll mean that she'll order some more, and I'll say, oh, you really should order the first one from the reprint. When's the reprint due out?
Same time, so they're coming out on the 18th. So they should be on their system. If they're not already on their system, they should be on the Ingram system by that date.
Yes, so we'll definitely do that.
All right. Well, hopefully this will make sense, because this is let me give you some background, or will it spoil the first book? Either way, it's going to.
Anyway, it's not a book.
Sorry.
We're going to read them. I'm going to read them anyway, so it doesn't matter.
I listened to something. I heard something where you were reading something. I actually listened to
it. Would have been a preview or a...
Yeah.
Aha. Okay. All right. Good. So in the first book, the main character ends up in the Middle East, kidnapped, and ends up siding with his kidnappers and fleeing from a mutual enemy, where they end up captured, and his captors are all killed. And killed horribly, absolutely horribly, very much in Varangian style. So if you've been watching Vikings, the Blood Eagle was employed, and then a burning of someone very, very important to the main character, Jean. So this is after he's, they've supposedly rescued him, but actually he had gotten to the point where he didn't want rescuing.
It's changed reasons.
And he's now under house arrest. So that's the beginning of the second book, is that probably the chapter that you may have watched, which is the death of his beloved.
Oh.
So here we go.
Right.
The old man spoke quietly, chanting some long-forgotten apothecary's healing rhymes. His expression was apologetic, and his hands moved with accustomed ease, yet his patient could not stifle the cries of pain the man's ministrations prompted. The salt water bit into his burns like fire, and if he had not been so weak, he would have fought the old man off. The pain was intense, causing Jean to bite into his pillow and sending his body rigid, yet it was nothing compared to what would follow. Jean shut his eyes tight as he saw the healer pull out the metal-bristled scourer and immerse it in the saline solution. He tried to prepare himself for the tearing of his flesh, the opening of his scars, but he knew he could not block out even 1/10 of its intensity. "Puta madre!" Jean screamed in Catalan, cursing the Holy Mother in a tongue he hoped his captors would not understand. The old man had promised this would help him heal, allow him use of his arms and legs again, and this was the only reason he endured the torment. Jean tried to breathe deeply, swearing to himself he would not beg the old man to stop. It was not the healer's fault the treatment was so cruel. He reinforced his will, imagining Ishtar was watching him. It gave him the strength he needed to fight off the pain, which would otherwise reduce him to a blubbering coward. Whenever Jean invoked her memory, he always remembered two things. First, the image of her in the grip of death amidst the flames, and secondly, the vision he had received as he plunged into unconsciousness from the smoke that filled his lungs. At first he had tried to rid himself of the image of her suffering, but as the days passed he came to realise he must never forget her death or the atrocities visited upon her. He must remember them and avenge them until his dying day. The scourer clawed at his skin, breaking down the scars that prevented him from standing, from using his hands or feet. "I deserve to suffer," he berated himself, stifling a cry. "I deserve to suffer because she suffered for me and what she believed." With every pass of the scourer, Jean's face grew less contorted as he channeled the agony inward, where it fueled the bonfire of his rage and self-loathing. Why didn't I fight for my family? Why didn't I fight God for Lara? The steel bristles caught in his flesh and would not release. The healer looked at Jean in terror, eyes darting from the brush embedded in Jean's thigh to the door through which he longed to flee. "It is all right, old man. I deserve this," Jean spat, as he grabbed hold of the brush handle and violently wrenched it from his flesh. Warm blood spurted in an arc, covering both men in a fine mist of red. Jean handed the brush to the reluctant healer and encouraged him to continue. So there you go. There's a couple of...
Yeah.
That was nice and tame. No.
Wow. That's wince-inducing. Like as I'm listening to it, it's like it makes me wriggle and wince.
Do you love that when you're writing it, or do you get immersed in it? Is it
Yeah, no, I get immersed in it. It's like a movie that plays in my head. So you know, I'm seeing it and I'm writing it. I'm trying to catch up with the video that's playing. And so even the battles, like when I see the battles as if I'm in them, and then I write them, you know, from the perspective of the character.
And how tiring is it to write scenes like that where your lead character is in pain and going through this terrible scenario, obviously with a good, you know, the desire for a good outcome, but how does it feel to be writing a story of pain for your lead character?
It's really interesting because when it first comes to me, it's like I until I write it down, it's running around in my head and it stops me concentrating on other things. So it's like when you wake from a really bad dream that, you know, might have been traumatic, and it just hangs on. Once I write it down, I feel much better. But at the end of The Infidel, with the death of a very major character who most people have said to me, you know, is their favourite character of the first book. It was I bawled. I cried my eyes out. And but I couldn't avoid her death because all of the plot lines that was where they were going to resolve. And the characters very often write themselves in a way. It's like once you've developed their character, it's almost like they're making the decisions about what happens to them rather than you. And sometimes you have to write stuff about them that you don't want to write, but they make you.
Oh wow! And you and I were talking a little earlier about that. You know, this is book 2 of the first 3 of potentially 6 or 9.
About a dozen I've mapped out. Yeah.
So can you actually see the story arc for the whole of that dozen? Wow.
Yeah. I don't have all of the detail, but I have the major markers for. So this is the second book that's set in the Middle Ages. The third book goes back to the 1st century AD, so the early Christian era. There'll be 2 books because what happens in the second book refers back to things that happened in the 1st century AD or BCE, and sorry, not BCE, CE. And so there'll be 2 books set in that era, and then this series can continue on through the Renaissance. But then another series will spring up and go through France from the books that are set in the early Christian era.
With what's the word I'm looking for? Family strings, familial strings, links, threads through into the new stories. So it'll be the grandchildren.
So it'll be the secrets that are found by this family in the second book that lead back to a story that is common to many families that starts off in the early Christian era and then branches out in different ways. So I have the Italian series, I have the French series, and then I have the series that's set in the 1st century, and that'll span Anatolia, Rome, the Levant, and Egypt. So it'll be.
How many of these places that you're writing that I know you've visited, obviously you've visited Italy, and but are you going to need to go and visit some of these places to get a real kind of?
Not really, because how they are now is nothing like what they were then. And in fact, I found that I'm better off working from the ruins of sorry, I'll just shut a door for a sec. So I'm actually better off working from historical records and first-person accounts. So what I've done with both the Infidel and Veritas is to get first-person accounts of the Crusades and accounts and descriptions of the buildings, because how those buildings look now is nothing like how they looked then, if they even exist now. So I found it's actually better for me not to see how it is now, to immerse myself in the historical record and the first-person accounts from Arabic and French and Italian and Jewish sources. And then that's what I'm doing with the third book, which goes back and follows a particular apostle in the 1st century AD. And I'm taking that from a lot of the, some of the books that have been more recently found, some of the Nag Hammadi documents from the Didache, which is one of the earliest Christian documents ever written that predates most of the Gospels, and from Tacitus and many of the other Roman and Greek historians of that era, as well as, of course, the New Testament documents and the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi documents. So yeah, so the book I'm doing right now is kind of, it's like I'm squashing. I've been researching it probably. I found my first research notes for it dated from 2000. So I've been on that trail for about 14 years.
Wow.
Whereas with Veritas and Infidel, it was about 10 years of research and then kind of refamiliarising myself again over the last couple of years.
And
so yeah, it's a big commitment.
If you haven't done any writing for a while, do you find the characters kind of going, we're waiting? Like, do you get this kind of, coming up feeling from them?
Well, it's really funny because I do a lot of research until it's almost like, you know, they talk about that hyperfrontality where your frontal lobe shut down and your subconscious mind is doing all the work and it just spits out the answers. And so I think when I do a lot of research that's very conscious, I'll then get to a point where the storyline and characters are writing themselves and they pop out. And so a funny thing happened is while I've been researching the third book, which is called Paul the Assassin, the sequel to Veritas, which will be in the Italian series called Fayum, started to pop out, and I wrote a whole chapter that's based on the characters back in Italy, you know, some years distant. And I just had to get them out because there's a few new characters that were obviously kind of gestating in the back of my mind and they wanted their say. So this chapter popped out and I'm going, hang on, you're not being written for another 2 years. What are you doing?
It's the teaser chapter for the next book.
Yeah, so I have my opening chapter for what will be book 5. So that one's...
Well, she said she's got the story arc in her head.
Wow. So
yeah, so about 12.
The characters in some of them just kind of appear, do they, in your mind?
Yeah, it's really interesting when you create it, and when you look at the historical background, you're immersing yourself in a world. So where a fantasy writer has to create all the details of that world, I have to immerse myself in the history.
Story archaeologist.
Wow.
Yeah, and then you create a thread of a story that weaves known facts with, you know, kind of blank areas. And I like finding mysteries. Like if I find that someone was killed mysteriously, I think about a way that I could weave them into my story. So if, you know, someone significant at the time, you know, died in a particular way, but centuries later we discover they were actually poisoned because archaeologists and paleo forensic scientists have now discovered this person's poison, then I like to add that in. So a lot of the stuff I put in is outside of the mainstream history books. It's things that are, you know, really been enabled because of the technology we have today that allows us to, you know, assess the genetic character of people deceased, or can analyse the contents of their stomach. You know, can forensically look at the blow to their skull and tell you how they died. And so I'm really assisted by that stuff because I can, there's a scene in Infidel which is, and it's actually taken from a first-person account of the preparation of an abbess for burial. And so I was able to use that account for this, you know, situation that one of my characters is involved with, where she's asked to be, you know, to basically to be take the dictation of the anatomist running this kind of almost not quite a it's not really like an autopsy, but they remove her organs and all of these sorts of things were done, which was done to holy people, and they preserve their organs separately. So I have this fantastic account of a medieval kind of autopsy style thing that my character gets to be involved in. So things like that are interesting, that give people insight. And so, you know, the chapter I've just read, how the Middle East was very far advanced to the West in their treatment of injury and wounds. And you know, if you got injured or were sick in the Middle Ages, you would really hope you had either a Jewish or an Arabic healer around, because you had a chance of survival. If you were in the hands of a Christian monk, you were pretty much dead.
Yeah.
You were just lucky if you survived.
Effectively, of the kind of the breaking down of the malformed scar tissue is pretty advanced. I mean, they do that now. I mean, they do it carefully and surgically, but that process of the way that they get rid of scars that are dysfunctional is they still remove the scar and then help the healing happen better second time. So the fact that they were doing that all those many years ago is just amazing.
It seems like history books should be, mainstream history books should be
written like this.
They should be electronic now. They should all be transparently electronic, so that when people do make new discoveries, they can just update them as they go. So it literally changes whenever you go into the history book.
I was going to say that I agree with that completely. Right. Like the olden type that you could buy the next volume. Now you buy the upgrade and it backfills history.
They're missing so much anyway. We've been watching programs now that talk about ancient aliens and things. I mean, stuff that's just been around for thousands of years that our history hasn't gone near it.
No.
Nobody's discovering it now.
And you know, there's remnants of Bronze Age brain surgery. They've found the tools, and they've found skulls that showed that the person had brain surgery and then lived for quite a few years before dying. So it was successful to some degree. It didn't kill the patient.
At least they didn't die at the time.
On the head with a rock. I think.
Yeah. What I thought you were going to say, and I think is also valid, is if only all of our history books were kind of written with the love and the flair and the passion and the bringing to life that your writing has. Imagine how many more happy history students there would be on planets. War and stuff. It has to be boring.
Well, history used to be written that way. I've got, up here on my bookshelves, I've got, I'll see if I can pull some down. So I've actually got these, fantastic books that take first-person accounts. Runciman wasn't first-person, but he's quoting Vigeardouin and Joinville, and what's really cool is this book here, which is the Chronicles of the Crusades. Which I'll come to. And so I actually made one of these chroniclers a character in he'll be a character in Veritas and book 5. Yeah. So he because he was there and he was part of the French contingent that was part of the Fourth Crusade, and so he actually becomes he's a character in my book, which is really cool that because when you read the chroniclers of the Crusades, I mean, there are some tedious bits, which is important because they actually have transcripts of letters and agreements and treaty negotiations, which you do want them to be valid. But there is the passion of people who were involved. It was life and death for them, and they lost comrades and friends, and so I like to honour that in my writing. And while yes, I have fictional characters that fill in gaps of things that we know were done, but who did them sort of is lost in time. But a large number of the characters in my books are real people, and I've tried to portray them as fully and roundly and historically as I can. Because we have ideas like even about Francis of Assisi that he was this really meek, mild person, and yes, he was generally non-violent, and he followed a message of poverty. But, he would get really angry, and he had to fight for the life of his monastic order in the time that I'm writing. They were facing extinction, and it was in his lifetime, it was only 10 years or so after he had his visions. And then, the other orders wanted him to be excommunicated and his order disbanded, and he could have been burnt at the stake as a heretic for saying that Christ was poor and wanted monks to be poor, because you can imagine that wasn't too popular in the Vatican.
Some of them didn't want to play that game.
No, and so when you have people who have to fight passionately and speak passionately, you can't have he wasn't this meek, mild person that he's often portrayed, wandering amongst the animals. He had to fight very vigorously for that, and he rubbed a lot of people off. What was that?
Lachlan said he was the Bob Brown of his day.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. So there were as many people who adored him as hated him. There would have been a lot of people who wouldn't have said very nice things about him, and then there were others who devoted their life to him. So, yeah. So and sometimes these characters are only there for a few pages in my book, but I've tried to give them.
And they're not all fictional characters. Some of them are real.
Yeah.
If someone is interested in what happened, they can actually go and find out more about that person and expand their own learnings about it. So one last question from an authoring perspective. Do you have a routine, or does this come in floods and famines, or do you write X number of hours every day, or I know you have a busy life. How does writing this fiction work fit in?
So what happens is I do a lot of research, and then the writing starts to come out of its own volition. And if I try to write prematurely, then it's horrible. It's like extracting teeth, and what I write is pretty crap. So I know when I'm ready to write, because as we were talking about before, the characters kind of start to leap out at you and don't let you sleep. And then I can sit down, and sometimes I might write a chapter, and sometimes I might write 3. You know, I've had as much as 20,000 words come out in one sitting and not been able to get out up until that was. So, yeah, and that's kind of uncomfortable because it's like you have to get it all down.
You can stop. No, you can't stop.
It's a bit like that. Well, and you don't want to lose it. You know, when you have that thread, it's like you have to see through till its conclusion.
So when you're doing that, when you're in that phase, so the story is just pouring out. The idea of the story is just tumbling out. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to do things in distinct phases. So some of my writing friends are brilliant at writing a chapter and editing it, and, you know, being able to do multiple passes of the chapter. I'm not good at that. I need to write a large slab and be in a creative phase, and then when that's out of me, I can go back and be critical and analytical. But I can't switch from creative to analytical very readily. It's like the analytical will then shut my creativity down, and if the creativity hasn't finished coming out, then I've kind of stifled myself. Yeah. So that's my process. So look, it's kind of, you know, I do it in chunks. You know, it's that sort of discontinuous learning and productivity. So I'll do it in chunks, and it'll come out, and it might be an hour of writing or 3 hours of writing or a full day of writing, or it may go on for a week until it's done. And which then means I don't sleep a lot. Like I might only sleep 3 or 4 hours a night, and then I'm up and writing again. I talk a lot about my characters.
I was also going to say, Lachlan said, how do you switch it off, how do you sleep? But what I was going to say is, do you get enough warning to be able to go shopping? And
you just talk. You can just talk it into a recorder.
I've often put ideas down through dictaphone or through notes, but I usually have to talk it to another person. So I have great writer friends that put up with me, and you know, I'll talk through some ideas. Or John, my partner, he gets his ears bashed a lot. Right at the moment, with working on the 3rd book, which is actually a prequel to this series called Paul the Assassin. John and my son, who's very into Jewish history, and he's into history of warfare, but particularly into Jewish history. They've been fantastic in helping me with research. So we end up having these great conversations where I'm thinking through, you know, the things that I want to include, and where very often I'll have hunches about a character, and then we actually go do the research and discover that my hunch is right. So sometimes I come up with these really bizarre sort of hunches about a character that might be historical. I have like a gut feeling from having profiled them. And then when we really look into the deeper research, we discover actually, yes, that is something that isn't publicly kind of known and in the high school history books about them, but actually is something that's true about their character. And that's pretty cool. That's when I know they're living in my head.
And also having that kind of team, having those other people around who have some passion in the same area and who can, you know, contribute conversation, but also listen intelligently help. Like listen with a tuning factor that's higher than just, you know, a stranger going, so what's it about? These are people who, especially with your son having that sort of very specialised interest. It's like having an on-board editing committee going, I don't know that that's gonna. What about this? And that kind of bouncing off, which is so critical when you're writing non-fiction. It's obviously working for you in fiction.
And I've got to say that the offshore oil and gas industry workers who often get to read my draft chapters as they're passed around the ships or rigs that John is working on are awesome. So they'll often send me things that they found that they think add to the storyline or validate something, or they'll say, "Oh, can we have more of this?" You know. So
it as opposed to when you thought it was going to, yeah.
Can you then actually just do that, provide them with more? If they say we want more of this.
Yeah, look, if it's really important to listen to the people who read your books and love your books. And so I actually went through a revising of Veritas, because Veritas, which is the one coming out shortly, it had a lot of history in it. And what I needed to do, and the feedback I got from my first readers, was that I needed more of the emotional response of the characters to the unfolding and learning of that history, and also to make the action more active rather than passive. So that's a really great thing. And of course, then I went back and went, oh yeah, of course they're right, because you've got to keep people reading. You can't get them bogged down in what might be dry facts.
And kind of theoretical conversations about it.
I don't know, I've heard plenty of speakers do that.
Well, actually, one of the best things that you can do is read your writing out loud. It's amazing what looks fine in print, and when you say it out loud, you go, "Oh my goodness!"
I know. See, when I was a journo on radio, we wrote for the ear as opposed to the eye. You had to write for the ear. You had to write
Quite
so
different.
it came out, so that people could actually hear it and understand it rather than just the way it's different. Yeah, it is.
So I love the idea. So we heard just in the first chapter of the
first part of the first chapter, yeah.
So there, I just love the idea of that as a teaser for people who might end up buying and reading the book. It's also potentially the start of you reading the whole book as an audio book. That's a whole different conversation. But as a part, because it's just because your reading style is lovely to listen to. It's great. It's really good fun.
I find it fascinating that you're able to do what you do, where you just sort of write these books and you have this arc in your head as to where it's going to go, where it is now, where it's going to go. I don't think I've ever had a complete thought in my life.
Love that.
No, I mean, I can think of an idea, but I can fill it out and how it's going to end, and it just seems to sort of come up to one bit, and you go, okay, well, that's nice, but I've got nothing. I'm done after that. I don't know how people do it. I really don't. George Lucas with Star Wars, same thing. He had it all planned out. So he's way ahead. Yeah.
Look, I think the thing is that, I learned very early on in my acting career that while I loved acting, I wanted to be the creator, not the interpreter. And interpretation is creative, don't get me wrong, but I kept thinking of where the stories could have gone and should have gone, and I always wanted to know what happened to the characters after.
Yeah.
The ending. And so I very quickly realized that, my dominant mode is the writing and the creating, and even when I was dancing, it was the choreography that really excited me. As much as I love dancing and interpreting, I wanted that creative control of directing where the action goes, and so I think it's just how different minds work, and then you have people who have the ability to interpret, and they add layers and richness and detail and flesh it out even more, and that's a skill that you have, Lachlan, that that I don't have. So it's pretty cool that we've all got the things that we're good at, and we're not all the same.
It all comes together. So who's going to play the lead in the movie? Who's in your head as the lead in the movie of the lead character that's travelled through Infidel and into Veritas?
Yeah.
It's really interesting because some of the actors that I would have liked are much too old now. So when these characters first were created in my head, that was when I was 20, so that's 20 plus years ago. So so those actors are they're too old. They'd be more likely to play the parent role. But there are some really good up and coming. They just need to be quite suave. These are not Anglo-Saxon looking people.
Okay.
But there's some interesting, very nice, dark-haired, dark-eyed, dark-haired, blue-eyed actors around at the moment. So I think
there are. There's a young guy that's in. He was in the movie Sisterhood of the Travelling Pants.
Oh yeah.
Whoever saw that, the guy that's the model for the art class. I kind of like him as Jean. I reckon he'd do a good job as Jean.
Yeah. You could direct him.
Who was it? Who is it? Who's the actor?
I'm trying to think. I have to look up his name, but he has startling blue eyes and dark hair and olive skin. Very, very dark olive.
It's a very good look.
That's
a very good look. Yeah. That look works really well, both on male or female. The women with those dark hair and blue eyes.
Not like that.
Yeah. It's quite a stunning.
You're a stunner.
I wanted to see a story or read a story about, how artists, going way back, some of the masters had their own studios and other people would fill in the painting for them or do the work. A lot of their work was done by other people and they added their touches to it and their signature, which I thought was interesting. It'd been interesting to see a story written from the perspective of the other artists, the ones who worked in the studio, who were quite brilliant, but never known, never talked about. And I just think it's fascinating. It'd be lovely to see what their day-to-day life would be like. Yeah,
I think that's a great one. Maybe you should start taking some notes.
Would they be really ticked a lot in life? I mean, no, I'm not. It's just curious. I think it's curious. I don't have it in my head. I'm just saying that idea is in my head. Anything else?
Someone who watches this video might go, "What a great idea for a book! I'm going to write that."
Good on, send me the first copy. That's all. It's good. Isn't it?
Well, hopefully, and you've got some things out of it that you can edit into something that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sounds really good. No, but thanks guys for being on and surviving the Google juggernaut and getting on with me and asking great questions and being just fantastic mates.
Well, we love you, Liz, and
you're very clever.
We are very clever, and we're looking forward to continuing on this journey. And we're about to buy books 1 and 2 of 12, so that's I love series.
It's sort of a commitment, really. And Helen, we should have a conversation off air about what your plans for your book. Love to help.
That's fantastic. We will definitely do that. Give me a little bit more time to flesh it out, and then I'll get some guidance from you on what to do next with some of the people that you know. That would be fabulous.
That would be my pleasure. All right, lovely people. We'll talk again. Thanks for being part of the broadcast. Bye.
Bye.